Sometimes, your whole life doesn't change in a single day, it changes in a single second. One slip of a finger, one call left open. And suddenly, reality shatters. My name is Jonathan Miller. I'm 38, living in Austin, Texas. I'm an electrical engineer and the owner of a private tech firm built on family capital. My family isn't a household name, but in the Texas energy world, we're known. I was engaged to Laura Campbell, a woman from Houston, heiress to a construction empire. She had 2 sons from a previous marriage. We had been together for 3 years. Our families saw a merger of assets. I saw a union of lives. I thought it was love. They thought it was a deal. I was wrong. Laura was striking, confident, beautiful, charismatic. We first met at the governor's reception, then again at a charity dinner hosted by the Reeves family in Dallas. I wasn't chasing alliances, but she was sharp. She listened. She seemed real. Within a year, she and her kids moved to Austin. I introduced her to my brother, an attorney, and my childhood friend Chris, my project lead. Everyone liked her. Most importantly, my parents did. My father said, "I see how she looks at you. That's not politics. That's personal." At first, everything moved steadily. Morning coffee together, weekend getaways, shared dreams of a lake house. I let myself believe I could belong to something genuine again. We spent holidays as a family, Christmas in Aspen, summers in Palm Springs. She bonded with my mother. Her sons began calling me by name, always respectful. It wasn't effortless, but it felt authentic. 2 years in, we announced our engagement. My mother took it as a blessing. Laura quickly got involved in my business. She and Jack, my brother, drafted a preliminary agreement on merging parts of our companies. But I didn't see it as business, I saw it as building a future. I believed it was real. During this time, I drifted from my circle. Chris once said, "You've disappeared, John. Just don't lose yourself in all this." I replied, "I'm not lost. I'm building." I truly believed it. I started skipping gym sessions, canceled Friday night hangouts. Everything revolved around the wedding. Laura pushed for a grand event. 200 guests. Local media coverage. She said, "We have to show this is a union of powerful names." I agreed. I just wanted her to be happy. The day before the wedding, she and her sons moved to her parents' house. I stayed home. That evening, she called, just like always. We talked about the schedule, the flowers, the forecast. I joked I was more nervous than on my first product launch. She laughed. Said, "It'll be perfect. I love you, John." We said goodbye. I set the phone down. A click. But the call didn't end. And that's when I heard my name turned into a transaction. She said, "He'll sign after the ceremony. During the honeymoon, it's all set up. Jack won't even notice the clauses if he's still managing the contracts." A man laughed. He said, "You really think this merger will go through without a hitch?" Laura answered, "John is honest. Too honest. He won't question me. That's his strength, and his weakness." My spine stiffened. The voice was familiar. Ryan, her investment advisor. We had crossed paths a few times. I thought he was a background player. I didn't know he was the architect of my undoing. The call still hadn't ended. My phone was glowing faintly beside me on the kitchen table. I grabbed my old recorder from the drawer and hit record, angling it toward the speaker. I didn't breathe. He said, "You think he's got feelings for the kids?" She said, "He likes them. He thinks it makes him noble to love another man's children. That's part of the image." He said, "And after the merger?" She answered, "After the merger, I'll decide what part of this I still want." I stood in the dark, staring out at the backyard I had landscaped myself over 3 long weekends. The chairs for the reception were already stacked by the patio. The white tent poles leaned beside the garage. Everything ready. Everything false. My fingers trembled slightly, but I didn't allow rage in. Only focus. I knew I had to move with precision. My father's voice echoed in my head. Never react. Strategize. I opened her tablet. The passcode hadn't changed. There they were, emails to Ryan, document drafts, preliminary transfer agreements. Files labeled. Post-merge planning. One folder stood out. Contingencies. Inside were timelines. Dates. My name in bold. Proposed shifts in voting rights. Potential sale of shares. This wasn't a mistake. It was a map. I just hadn't seen the signs. I transferred every file to a flash drive. Took photos of the notes. Sent the audio to Jack. He called within minutes. He said, "I'll kill the legal track. I'm starting with asset protection now. John, we have to play this quietly. You have to be calm." I said, "I am." Then I called Chris. Told him to pull the event staff from the property at dawn. Told him to cancel the floral deliveries and the string quartet. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Understood." The house was silent. I walked upstairs, packed a bag, and returned to the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of scotch, leaned against the counter, and watched the minutes pass. While she rehearsed her vows, I was dismantling her plan, piece by piece, and silently. The morning of what was meant to be our wedding broke clear and golden. The Texas sky stretched wide above the neighborhood, unaware of the silent war playing out beneath it. I watched the sunrise from my office window. I didn't go to the venue. I didn't put on the custom-tailored navy suit. I didn't tie the silk tie Laura had picked. Instead, I made coffee. Black. No sugar. I reviewed the files one more time. Then I met Jack at his downtown office. He had already filed for emergency injunctions, freezing my business assets, halting any pending legal mergers. His face was hard, composed. He said, "We're covered. Her side won't be able to move anything without your signature now. But you'll need to speak to her. Publicly or privately, that's your call." I replied, "I'll handle it privately." Back home, I changed into jeans and a button-down. Something simple. Unremarkable. By 11 a.m., Laura had called 5 times. I didn't answer. At noon, her father arrived. He said, "Jonathan, this is a mistake. You're letting nerves ruin a great alliance." I said, "This was never an alliance. It was an ambush." He didn't deny it. Just adjusted his cufflinks and said, "You're making enemies you can't afford." I looked him straight in the eye. I said, "I was raised not to trade my name for favors. Let her know, the wedding is off. The guests should go home." He left without another word. Half an hour later, Laura appeared at the door. No makeup. Eyes red. Dressed in white, but no longer a bride. She stepped in without asking. She said, "You don't understand what you're doing. This isn't just about us." I answered, "You're right. It's about trust. And you dismantled it. Piece by piece." She cried. Said, "You were supposed to be different." I said, "I was. And now I'm done." She reached into her purse, pulled out a small box, the rings. She said, "Do you want them back?" I replied, "No. Let them remind you of what you lost." She left them on the table and walked out. By dusk, the guests had been notified. Some stayed in town, confused. Others left. The venue, a pristine estate outside Austin, stood decorated but empty. Chris sent me a photo, white chairs in neat rows, untouched. The altar bare. My name still printed on the program covers. I poured another drink. Sat alone. And let it all fall quiet. There was a wedding, but no groom. Just the truth, standing in my place. The morning after the non-wedding, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at a room that no longer held anything sacred. The silence was thick, no laughter of children downstairs, no hum of text notifications. My phone, resting face down, hadn't moved in hours. Jack arrived around 10. He brought coffee, black like mine. He sat without speaking. He said, They'll go after public sympathy next. Be ready. I answered. Let them. I have the truth. The media didn't get wind of it. No press releases, no drama. But within our circles, the story spread. Chris said the vendors whispered theories. A cousin called, offering support, then asked if I was okay. I told him I was. Just sorting things out. That night, I got an email from Ryan. No subject. No apology. Just a line. You overplayed your hand. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Jack. Laura didn't reach out. Not directly. But her sister sent a long message about how I'd broken hearts and humiliated the family. There was a line that stood out. You may have stopped the wedding, but you didn't stop what comes next. I reread it. Twice. I called Jack. I said, They're not done. He replied, No. They're recalculating. For the next week, I tightened everything. Security on the company servers. Legal locks on property titles. I even restructured the board to prevent backdoor influence. Every move I made was clean, silent, documented. Chris handled the team. He said, We're behind you, man. We all saw it. I asked, What did you see exactly? He said, A guy who built something real. And a woman who thought she could rewrite the blueprint. Laura's father sent one last message. It read, You chose pride over progress. I replied, I chose integrity over manipulation. Then silence again. In the quiet, I found clarity. Not peace, but the space to prepare for what they still hadn't tried. 3 weeks passed. The public forgot. The guests moved on. But inside my world, nothing settled. It just shifted. I found myself walking longer routes to the office, cutting through neighborhoods I hadn't visited in years. Not to avoid anything, but to remember who I was before her. One afternoon, as I passed the old park on 14th and Carson, I saw her youngest son, Evan, sitting alone on the swing set. No phone, no tablet. Just staring down at the ground. He didn't see me at first. Then his head lifted. He said, Are you mad at us? I replied, No. You didn't do anything wrong. He nodded. Then added, I liked it better when we were all in the same house. I said, Some things fall apart so better things can be built. He didn't answer. Just swung quietly. That night, I sat on the back porch, staring at the ring box Laura had left behind. It was still there, unopened. Like a tiny tomb. Jack came over. We talked about the company. About legal cleanup. About damage control. He said, They're trying to paint this as a family feud. Her people are pushing a jilted groom with cold feet angle. I replied, Let them. I'm not playing in the media. Chris sent me screenshots of posts from anonymous accounts. Whispered theories. One claimed I was secretly bankrupt. Another said I had a breakdown. None mentioned the merger. I called Chris. I said, Let it play. Don't defend me. Just tighten internal communications. He said, You sure? I said, They expect noise. Let's give them silence. The silence, though, didn't stop the calls. Former investors. A potential buyer from Arizona, suddenly backing off. Jack fielded most of it, but one call he insisted I take. It was from George Russell, a board member of a major tech holding company. He said, Jonathan, I've seen your numbers. I know your value. But your name's in the air right now, and not in ways we like. I said, Then you're not the right partner. He said, That may be the most honest thing I've heard this month. Good luck, Miller. I hung up. Then turned off my phone for 2 days. During that quiet, I wrote everything down. Every date. Every piece of evidence. I began a record, not for revenge, but for legacy. If anyone tried to rewrite my story, I'd have the original. A week later, Laura showed up at the office. My receptionist buzzed me. She said, Laura Campbell is here. She says it's about the boys. I told her, Let her in. But leave the door open. Laura looked different. Not broken, but worn. Not defeated, but smaller. She said, "They miss you. Especially Evan." I said, "I miss who I was with them. Not with you." She stepped forward. She said, "I didn't think you'd ever find out. It was never supposed to go that far." I replied, "It always goes that far when you build lies into foundations." She started to cry. Said, "What do I tell them now?" I said, "Tell them the truth. It's overdue." She left without another word. Later that night, Chris came over. He handed me a folder. He said, "I kept this from the early days. Drafts from her email you didn't see. She was planning it months before you proposed." I looked through them. The tone was cold. Clinical. Asset-oriented. I said, "It was never about love." He answered, "No." "But your response?" "That was." While they played games with names, I stayed loyal to mine, and now I had to protect it with everything I had. A month had passed. The headlines faded. But I hadn't forgotten. And neither had they. I met with Jack in the boardroom one evening. The city skyline glowed beyond the glass. He laid out a folder, another legal attempt from Laura's family. A countersuit for reputational harm. He said, "It's posturing. They're hoping for a settlement." I replied, "Then they're misreading me again." We didn't settle. Instead, we hosted a private shareholder meeting. I brought Chris, Jack, and 4 senior advisors. Not to air grievances, but to show strength. To reaffirm direction. One of the new investors, a woman named Elise Nguyen, spoke up. She said, "This isn't just about damage control. It's about legacy, isn't it?" I answered, "It's about protecting what's real." After the meeting, I walked Elise to the lobby. She paused by the elevator. She said, "I knew your father. He was quiet. But sharp. You're like him." I replied, "He taught me to never speak what you can prove through action." The elevator closed. And I felt, for the first time, the storm beginning to pass. But not for long. 2 days later, Chris came into my office, face pale. He said, "John, there's been a breach. Someone accessed archived communications. Internal. Backups. Old contracts." I stood up. "How?" He said, "We don't know yet. But Jack's running trace protocols." That night, we met again, Jack, Chris, and our head of IT. A man I hired 2 years ago named Mason Carter. Mason looked nervous. He said, "We traced it to a remote device. Password was admin level. It had to be planted." I said, "Are you telling me we've had a leak?" Jack added, "A mole. Likely from the early engagement days." Mason handed over a list. 3 potential suspects. One name stood out, Amy Doyle. Laura's assistant. I remembered her. Soft-spoken. Always around. Now vanished. Chris said, "She cleaned out her desk 2 days after the cancelled wedding." I said, "Find her." Quietly. It took 2 weeks. Chris used a contact in Phoenix. Amy had fled there, working under a different name. We didn't confront her. We documented. Jack built the case. Meanwhile, Evan, Laura's youngest, sent me a letter. Handwritten. Just 2 lines. "I know it wasn't your fault. I missed the Saturdays." I folded it and placed it in my desk. Some ties, though painful, deserved memory. 3 days later, the final hit came. Jack burst in. He said, "They're going for a hostile acquisition. Using shell companies. Bidding low on your minority shares. It's coordinated." I replied, "Who's leading it?" He hesitated. "Ryan. And George Russell." Russell, the man I spoke to weeks ago. The one who said I'd spoken with honesty. I said, "He lied." Chris said, "We still have time. But not much. We need a counter-strategy." We built it over 48 hours. Night sessions. Phone calls. Leverage points. Then I made my move. I called Elise. I said, "You asked me if this was about legacy." "It is." "You in?" she replied. "Send me the brief." "I'm in." With Elise's block of shares and 2 silent partners from Denver, we turned the tide. The board met. The vote was close, but we won. Russell was forced out. The acquisition collapsed. And Laura? She sent one final message. "You've proven your point. Now what?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. My silence said everything, and now, it was their turn to watch the empire they built on lies begin to crumble. 3 months had passed since the day I walked away from Laura Campbell. The hostile acquisition had failed. Elise and our new partners helped stabilize the business. Internally, we were leaner but stronger. The brand had survived the hit. My name was intact. But something else had changed. I had changed. I wasn't the same man who once believed in a ceremony more than he believed in signatures. That man was gone. On a Thursday morning in early spring, I got a letter from Laura's attorneys. A formal request for a meeting. Not litigation, mediation. They wanted closure. Her words, not mine. Jack said, "It's a trap. They're trying to rewrite the record." I answered, "Then I'll bring the truth with me." The meeting was held in a neutral office in Dallas. 1 glass table. No cameras. No notaries. Just 4 chairs. Laura arrived alone. She said, "I'm not here to win. I'm here because there's nothing left to fight for." I replied, "That was true the moment you built our life on leverage." She looked different. Weary. Not defeated but empty. She said, "Evan still asks about you. So does Marcus." I said, "Then give them honesty. Not a version of it." She nodded. Then placed a folder on the table. Inside was a signed withdrawal from all business activity involving my company. Her father had countersigned. She said, "No more games." I said, "You should have thought of that before you made a deal instead of a home." We stood. No handshake. No final words. That weekend, I went to the lake house. The one I almost sold. Chris met me there. He said, "You still thinking about all that?" I replied, "No. I'm thinking about what comes next." He tossed me a beer. He said, "That's the John I know." We sat in silence. No big statements. No resolutions. Just air and water and the sound of wind through old trees. A week later, Evan sent me another note. It read, "Mom said you were brave. I think you were honest. That's harder." I kept that one in my wallet. I'm not rebuilding. I'm not recovering. I'm redefining. Because some stories aren't tragedies. They're clarifications. And sometimes, walking away isn't weakness. It's the purest form of strength. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. About real men who don't raise their voice. They act. Cold. To the end.